Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world that, in spite of the fact that there are a lot of things happening that shouldn't be happening, that gives so much to us. It's actually unbelievable when you look back into history. If only you look to music, how much beautiful pieces we have, how many composers in the past hundreds of years dedicated their entire life, in many cases even their health, just to write pieces that come to us for free now. We just can listen to them, we can play them, we can discuss about them, we can reconstruct them even if you want in terms of tempo. We can focus on that. It's so fascinating. So let's not forget that we are blessed, even though we live in a time where things should not or should go in a different direction. Can we agree on that? And so many beautiful pieces have come to us. One of those, that's absolutely one of my favorite pieces ever, is Maurice Ravel, Pavane pour un infante défunte, translated like the Pavane for a dead princess. Maurice Ravel, for me, was one of the composers. Of course, the Bolero we all know. His piano concerto is unbelievable. It was one of those composers that was dearest to me. Like when I was 18, 20, 22 years in conservatory, that time I listened to Maurice Ravel a lot of times. But this Pavane was always something that both the versions for orchestra and piano, because we have two versions, that had something special, that was so melancholic, that just bypasses your brain and directly goes to your soul. This video is about Maurice Ravel's Pavane, not to discuss the beauty of it, but to dive into something that we like to dive into on this channel, which is tempo reconstruction. And the story of today is a special one. This is not a big story, but it could become a big story. And it is also not a story that I could share with you saying like, okay, we figured it out. This is something there, you open a door and you see something behind the door in the other room. You say, was I right or was I wrong? What do I miss there? There is something that we need to talk about. But before we do that, I want to share with you some performances of Maurice Ravel's Pavane to just show you not only the beauty of the piece. If you haven't heard it before, then just these few measures that I will give you from each performance should be enough to first watch this video, of course, but after this video to just go on YouTube and find some performances and listen to the piece. It's absolutely something you want to listen to. You want to know this piece. You have to own this piece. So I'm going to share with you a few performances, starting with the slowest, which is Richter. He plays this piece in a tempo around quarter note 44 with a little bit of rubato. It's quite steady. And I think the fastest performance will be Casares around quarter note 56. And you have other performances, whether they are recorded earlier in times or recent, but this is the tempo frame in which actually everybody plays this piece today. Let's listen. And before you jump to the comment boxes and say to me, hey, Wim, we have even a Ravel recording, so an original recording by the composer. I know that. I'm going to feature that, but I have to put a little bit of a disclaimer here because that recording is a pianola recording. It's like played on a machine where the piano actually is putting holes in a piece of paper that comes out. It's a piano roll recording. And it's a very complex history. Without the full history of these piano rolls, so the composer or the pianist plays them, that roll is not the one you hear. They go to an engineer. The engineer copies actually everything, fixes the wrong notes. That's why, for instance, the piano roll Paderewski is like unbelievable, and the acoustical Paderewski is like a little bit still fascinating. I'm not downplaying the guy, but he plays a little bit more wrong notes. Let us say it like that. But that was the time, and many of these piano roll recordings, from what I have read in articles, if you have the history, meaning if you have the original ones, and essentially also what's very essential is the tempo, so the speed to which these rolls should be played, you see oftentimes, especially with the virtuoso pianist, quite an increase in the end result. So the piano rolls recordings we hear from the big pianist, you have to listen to them with a huge grain of salt. But that's for another time. Here is Maurice Ravel in the version that we know of his own Pavane. And now we come to a very interesting point. It's the point I want to share with you, obviously. When you go on IMSLP and you page through some editions, then you will see that Maurice Ravel's tempo of quarter note 54 is actually what's mentioned in the score. Just paging through a few scores, you see quarter note 54, quarter note 54, quarter note 54, quarter note 54, quarter note 54 for the orchestral version as well. But that's not the original tempo. The original tempo of the first edition of this piece, 1899, is not quarter note 54, it is quarter note 80. And now, if you follow this channel somewhat longer, you know where I'm going to. And that's also why I started this video by saying, like, it's like just watching into, you open this door and you just see a little bit of that room and you think like, quarter note 80, it's not a misprint. We have this piano roll recording of Ravel, it's quarter note 56. Again, we don't know anything. I don't know anything. If you know more about the history of this particular piano roll, I would love to know. But as for now, I don't know anything of the history of this piano roll recording. And since the tempo that Ravel plays this piece on this recording is exactly that of his orchestral score, I assume that the people who just fixed this piano roll or made this piano roll or just played the piano roll, maybe there is no tempo indication on that particular roll, they just matched the tempo that I found in this score. That happens more than you think. When there is no speed indication, piano rolls are actually set to the tempo that's in the score, and that's also partly the reason why some of these piano roll recordings are so incredibly fast. You can speed them up indefinitely. The Rachmaninoff recordings, we have some acoustical, but we have a lot of piano roll recordings, a lot more piano roll recordings that are waiting to be just recorded. I mean, they're still waiting. They're in an archive. It's unbelievable that we don't have them, at least as I know. But also Scriabin, there are some unbelievably fast Scriabin recordings that everybody that I talk to agrees on, like that's almost impossible, if not impossible. So when something is too good to be true, oftentimes it's not true, and that's the problem with these piano roll recordings. In this particular case, 54-56 is not surprisingly the tempo that Ravel gave for his orchestral score. Why is there quarter note 80 and quarter note 54 for basically the same notation, for basically the same piece? The orchestral score has long, which is slow, and the piano record of the piano score has assez doux, mais d'une sonorité large. So you can debate forever what that means, but it's not particularly presto tempo. So it's both meant, obviously, I would say, to be played in the same range. But there is more than that. If I would speed up, for instance, Richter's recording to match the quarter note 80, you get this result. And now we can debate forever if this is slow or this is like long. But I don't think this is particularly a slow piece in this sense. So quarter note 80 in itself, if you take it literally, and of course you know where I'm heading to, but I just want to share this with you and share this way of reasoning. Quarter note 80 is not a tempo indication that you expect in a piece with this tempo inscription. And seeing that, for instance, Richter plays almost half of that tempo, also seeing that this orchestral score, which was published later, 1917, if I'm not mistaken, well, that's almost 20 years in between. So did Ravel change his mind? And then the question is, did he change his mind to slow this piece down or to speed it up? In other words, is the Pavane in 1899 as a piano score, does it have a metronome mark, quarter note 80, which is a whole beat metronome mark? And did he transition to a single beat metronomization in 1917 with the orchestral score? And before you say like, this is utterly nonsense, it's not possible because we don't have anything written about it, that's something I don't know. That's the reason why I say like, we don't have all the information, but there are some layers we can add to this. Just going to Wikipedia, I'm not saying that Wikipedia is the end source, but it gives a little bit of information also, and certainly when there are footnotes and references that you actually can double check. So what I write here on Wikipedia is that the Pavane was a slow professional dance that enjoyed great popularity in the courts of Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries. So whatever, that gives a little bit of hint, but also not more than that. But then it's actually interesting what they write here. Ravel intended the piece to be played extremely slowly, more slowly than almost any modern interpretation, according to his biographer Benjamin Ivry or Ivory. I don't know the guy. So I haven't read this biography, so I don't know exactly what the context is. I would love to know that. But this is a very interesting comment. Also the following, the critic Emile Vuillermoz, I don't know if I pronounced that name correctly, complained that Ravel's playing of the work was unutterably slow. And that's something I could trace back online. That's a review, I think, of a concert that he played pretty late in January 1932, in which he not only conducted his piano concerto with another pianist, but he played apparently the Pavane. And so the critic says like, yeah, it was unutterably slow. But if we listen to Richter's performances, also Walter Gieseking I shared in the overview, those are pretty early recordings. They're old recordings. So 1932, of course, is much earlier than the Richter recording, but Gieseking will be in the 50s. So we can assume that this 44-ish quarter note until 56, that was a tempo also there in the 1930s. So if Ravel played a tempo that in that time was felt as unutterably slow, then it's safe to assume that Ravel played it even slower than that, and that puts a little bit of question marks to his piano roll recording. That's why I say like we need the history of those piano roll recordings. Only from this direction, like approaching that piano roll recording from this direction, metronome mark of the orchestral score 1917 and the metronome mark from the piano original edition score, and that apparently knowing at least a little bit of about the context, that Ravel intended this piece to be played extremely slowly. Well, quarter note 80, we've just listened to that in Richter's like digitally adjusted recording. It's not utterly slow. And so the question is now, what do we do with all of that information? We can take a very straightforward approach and say like, Ravel is only was only a single beat composer, and so the quarter note 80, we consider that metronome mark to be just a misprint or a mistake. Well, then in that case, one should find also some literature, some letters, which I don't have, about the fact that that quarter note 80 was a mistake. And also, why does like 50% of the pianists today still play in a tempo that is about half of that? And that it feels as a very natural tempo. You cannot say when you listen to Richter, yeah, it's a little bit slower than, for instance, Katsaris and some others, but you cannot say like it's so much slower that it's out of the context. There is a huge probability that quarter note 80 was just a correct tempo, and that it was not meant as a single beat tempo, and that he later transitioned to a different metronomization system. Am I 100% sure that is correct what I'm saying now? No. But do I think that the probability that this is correct is high? I think yes. And the reason why I'm pretty confident that this is a direction that is not nonsensical is because we have other sources from that same time that confirm this double use of single beat and whole beat metronomization just randomly across each other. It's so intertwined. The most remarkable case study was done by Henrico Stuwen, alias Marcel Punt, who published a book about Reger-Straube, the Reger-Straube code. And I just show you one of these graphs that he has in his book, where in the left column you see Reger's metronomization and the right column you see Straube's metronomization. And it's not always a ratio of 1 to 2, but oftentimes it is. And even if it isn't, it's very close. Seeing this overview from two people, Max Reger, the composer, and Karl Straube, Max Reger's first and foremost and most popular, most wanted performer of the premieres of all his organ works. Straube and Reger were friends. They lived in the same city. They saw each other. They talked to each other. There are notes from Reger to Straube that he admired his playing so much and that he made the most beautiful performance out of his music. So there is no doubt. There is nothing you can say that Max Reger would disapprove Karl Straube's approach. And when Straube published his version or his editions of the Max Reger organ works, he changed the metronomization. And that's close enough to a ratio of 1 to 2 to very confidently say that Straube used a single beat metronomization, whereas Reger used a whole beat metronomization. And it's even going more crazy than that, but I will talk about it in another video. That Reger also changed metronome marks of his own scores and new editions where he also halved, quote unquote, the metronome marks. And there are other case studies than this. But if the Reger-Straube thing existed, then there is no reason why that shouldn't happen or have happened with Maurice Ravel as well. And just finally, this is one of those pieces that we are all very comfortable in, like saying, okay, we play it a little bit slower and we don't even attempt to go faster. This is also, again, one of those pieces we talked about Chopin's Opus 10 number 3, like the La Tristesse, that everybody today, literally everybody, plays in whole beat. Except when you ask the question, why do you play it so slow? Then suddenly people start to speed things up. I made recently a video about that. When people play it in concert, then suddenly they go back to whole beat. So this is one of those cases where the Pavane, I mean, there is no necessity apparently for pianists to shine, to show their finger dexterity, whatever. And so they just make music. And what happens is that they then play the quarter note 80 in a whole beat tempo. The thing with the orchestral score is Ravel sped his music up a little bit. He didn't slow it down. He was criticized apparently also when he performed the piece. So maybe it was just an adjustment to the public taste. You can also solve it in the way of this edition that I found also on IMSLP. You just give both metronome marks. Quarter note 5480. I don't know what the reasoning was behind this score, but it feels to me a little bit weird. And so if you're watching this video now and you would say like, okay, but that's the Pavane of Ravel and that's a whole beat composition. Okay, great, fine. But how would Beethoven sound in whole beat? Then I have good news for you, and probably you'll already know it, but we launched, of course, the symphonies of Beethoven in whole beat, and not about in whole beat, exactly in whole beat. You can actually challenge us by taking your metronome and checking the tempo of each movement, and I guarantee you, you won't find any deviation. Not talking about 1 beat per minute, but 2 beats per minute. That would be already great if you would find that. And all jokes apart, it's a beautiful box, 10 CDs with an extensive booklet where actually the entire project is explained with all the metronome marks of the symphonies and beautiful pictures. Also, when you don't have a CD player or you still want to have it, holding this is just so nice. But we also launched them on Bandcamp, a streaming platform. You can listen to them 3 times, and then Bandcamp will ask you to give us some money, which is actually like it should be. Spotify, are you listening? We worked over 4 years on this, so I don't know how many hours. I should calculate the hours that we worked on this, and then next time I will do that. So go ahead and make sure you have one of these, if only to look at. It's just something you want to hold, you want to, even the smell. I don't know, if you open a book or something like this, the smell is just so nice. But that's just me, I guess. Okay, guys, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching. We see each other very soon again. Bye.